German Chancellor Angela Merkel has warned the UK that countries at the bargaining table negotiate better deals than those outside the room. Mrs Merkel said it was a decision for the British people, but she hoped the UK would vote to stay in the European Union in the referendum on June 23. She said the UK as part and parcel of the EU was of benefit to all of us. Leave campaigners said staying in might be in Germany's interest, but that does not mean it's in the UK's interest. BBC political editor Laura Kuenssberg said the intervention was interesting because a few weeks ago German sources were saying privately that Mrs Merkel wasn't minded to say anything about the referendum. Speaking during a news conference with NATO General Secretary Jens Stoltenberg in Berlin, Mrs Merkel said, "Obviously, it is up to the citizens of the UK themselves how they wish to vote on the upcoming referendum. I've said repeatedly before that I personally would hope and wish for the UK to stay part and parcel of the EU." She said, "We work well together with the UK, particularly when we talk about new rules for the EU. We have to develop those together with the UK, and whenever we negotiate that, you can much better have an influence on the debate when you sit at the bargaining table and you can give input to those negotiations, and the result will then invariably be better rather than being outside of the room." She stressed the importance of the single market, a free trade area which also includes the free movement of goods, people, and capital, and said countries outside the EU will never get a really good result in negotiations. "It would be not only be in our interest, but it could also be in the interest of Britain when it can bring its whole political weight to the negotiating table as part and parcel of the EU." Labour MP and Leave campaigner Kate Hoye told the BBC Mrs Merkel would be well advised to stay out of what is a very, very important vote for British democracy. "I really don't think that Angela Merkel telling the British people how they should vote in a democratic referendum in 3 weeks' time will affect anyone's vote," she said. "We can do extremely well outside the European Union. We don't need to be in the single market. Other countries trade with the European Union and are not in the single market. We are the 5th largest economy, we can look outwards." Mrs Merkel is the latest EU leader to speak out about the UK's referendum as the campaign enters its final weeks. On Wednesday, Dutch PM Mark Rutte warned of a tit-for-tat response if the UK were to implement a points-based immigration system, while on Thursday, Spanish PM Mariano Rajoy warned that the consequences of an exit vote would be very negative for British citizens.